Kia ora. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Lincoln University campus and welcome to B-Link Innovation. And welcome to this really exciting innovation series where we're actually going to talk about cannabis. And is it the next big hit for Aotearoa New Zealand when it comes to its multi-use and multi-purpose products that we can actually get out of that plant? That's what we'll be discussing this morning. But before I'm going to do that and introduce you to your wonderful lineup of speakers, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping as you are very well used to it, that I will do that. I would also welcome the people online at the moment that this is live streamed, this is recorded. So the recording will be sent to, or the link will be sent to everybody, both here in face-to-face in the room, as well as online. At the end of the session, there will be a Q&A, and you will be able to put questions in the Q&A box with your Zoom link so that my team can actually read those questions up. So there is plenty of time to interact both here in the room and as well as online. Okay, housekeeping. For those of you that don't know B-Link, we are a full business unit of Lincoln University, and we basically do three things. We try to connect people, and very much like events like this, and we hope that then you are actually start to talk to each other. And so don't feel like strangers, but feel like people that are interested in the same topic start to talk, because at that moment in time we are convinced that if you start to connect, collaboration is possible. And of course, if you start to collaborate, then of course innovation will come. So that's what we try to do with the events that we are organizing, and we also have a co-working space where startups can actually grow their business. Health and safety, we do not expect any fire drills. And so if there is an alarm, it is for real. We have a very capable team, Katie, Joe and myself, that will guide you out. So please follow our instructions. Toilets are, if you walk to the back of the room, turn right, and then the toilets are, I think, the third door on your right-hand side. We do provide coffee, tea, and wonderful muffins. I'm sorry, people online. That's if you would have been here, and so please enjoy those also after when the speakers are done. Feel free to network. So without any, getting all these slides to go through. Please be social, right? So please let us know what if we're doing things right. Please let us know if we can improve. Now introducing the first speaker, because that's why we came here this morning. Peter works at Ag Research, and Peter started his career in the textile and fiber sector, and later on discovered this wonderful plant called hemp, or cannabis, and actually looking at the fibers coming out of that plant. But more recently, Peter is actually focusing on the actual multi-use of this wonderful plant, and Peter will take us on a journey of those multi-uses. Peter, without any further ado.
Thank you, Wim. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk here today. Thank you to Blink, and thank you to everyone here that's in the audience today and those that are online. As Wim said, I'm Peter Brorens. I'm from Ag Research, and just across the road from here is where I'm located. So today I'm going to introduce cannabis and the two cousins, the industrial hemp and the medical cannabis side. I'm going to take a brief look at the legislation around these two, because difficult to explain the two industries and where they sit and how things go without looking at that, and then look at the future and what might be in the future for farmers and the opportunities that are there. So if you think of cannabis, most people, it's probably their first thought's going to be that it's a drug. They might think, oh, it's a plant. Some people might think is it a good investment? Probably some of you here thinking, is it a good investment? The ones not here, probably the ones who think it's too risky and a bit of a venture onto the dark side. But essentially it's a plant, it's a species of plant, and when we grow cannabis for drugs or for the hemp side of things, for the fibre, we're essentially growing the same plant, different varieties, grown for different purposes and grown in different ways. So the distinction, the legal distinction between hemp and cannabis is the THC level, and in New Zealand that's hemp has to be below 0.35% THC. So this one on the left here is probably a plant that's more suited for hemp fibre. On the right, more branching, more flowers, it's more suited for seed or for cannabis. And the other big distinction between growing for hemp seed or for cannabis is that for cannabis you don't let the plant get pollinated. So the flower then produces a lot of the oils and chemicals that are sought after in the cannabis industry. So this just illustrates the different forms of the hemp plant, the cannabis plant. For growing fibre, you grow a very tall plant. You want a plant that flowers late in the season so that you can get lots of vegetable growth and get that stalk high. The cannabis plant is a photoperiod plant, so it flowers when the day length hits a certain day length. So it's not one that you put in the ground, leave there for 3 months and it's going to flower. You put it in the ground, it'll flower when it flowers, when the day length changes. So that's something that farmers have to be aware of, and certainly the different varieties, depending on where they've been cultivated, where they've been bred, will flower at different day lengths. And this is part of what New Zealand has to do, is to look at varieties for New Zealand. For oil seeds, it's different. You don't want too much stalk, so you get an early flowering, early maturing variety, grows a little bit of stalk, then puts all its energy into flowers. For narcotics, you'll see, or cannabis in terms of the drug, you'll see quite a different shape of plant, growing more widely apart, lots of flowers. There's a little bit of, if you've been in this industry, there's some controversy, I guess, over whether this Cannabis sativa is the species, or whether cannabis and indica is a species as well. Generally, I think now most people are saying that Cannabis sativa is a species, indica and the other varieties that might have been called species at various times are subspecies at the best, and possibly just varieties. So going on to the chemical side, when you're growing for cannabinoids, there's over 100 cannabinoids that have been extracted from the flower of the hemp plant. Other extractions too, terpenes, flavonoids, other things that may not fit in the medical space but could be a valuable source of useful chemicals. THC is one of the only of a handful of ones that are psychoactive, and that gets a lot of publicity around the THC side, but the vast majority of them are not psychoactive. Plants in this space usually are classified now by instead of their morphology or their shapes as they used to be, they're classified by their chemical type and chemotype, and generally there's 3 chemotypes. There's high THC and there's high CBD, and then there's a mixture of the two where you get a bit of both. The medical hemp is of so much interest in the therapeutics industry at the moment because of this endocannabinoid system that runs throughout the body, a bit like our nervous system or our vein system. It's right through the body. There's a couple of main sensors on that system. They pick up things from these cannabinoids that are extracted from the hemp, and so therapeutics, it's a new part of some of the medical solutions for things, because it's different to most other drugs. So it can be added on top of other drugs and things. Putting them side by side, industrial hemp, medical cannabis. Industrial hemp, we've had that around for a while. It's licensed activity still, but it's a fairly low barrier to entry. It's grown outdoors. Rotational crop for seed, fibre, herd, oil, phytoremediation or biomass. Because it's been around for a while, certainly in Canterbury the infrastructure is good, and we've just recently, NZ Natural Fibres have got their decorticator up and running. So we have got now a system for separating the fibre out and separating the fibre from the herds. The herd in actual fact is probably more sought after at the moment than the fibre, but that may change over time. Medical cannabis side, highly regulated, grown indoors and some outdoors. The flowers obviously the main focus, unpollinated. New Zealand law is pharmacy only and prescription only for any of the medical cannabis stuff. And it's grown in relatively small quantities compared to the industrial hemp. It's a new industry. The regulations evolving, the regulator, the Ministry of Health has been given the job of regulating medical cannabis. They're relatively new to that sort of job, so they're learning. But on the whole, they're a willing regulator wanting to have this industry succeed. If you look at the products from hemp, you can put them sort of from one end of the spectrum to the other, going from the fibre side, the herd, the food, through to natural products, nutraceuticals, low dose CBD, high dose CBD, and right through to the THC products. And then we look just a little bit at the legislation, because that's where the separation between those two parts comes in. Hemp, 2006, so we've had the legislation for a while. We've been growing it for 15 years. As I said, the infrastructure is good. 2018, they tweaked it so that we could sell hemp seed for human consumption. Unfortunately, at the same time, they confirmed that we shouldn't have been feeding hemp to animals, and that we're now not allowed to feed hemp to animals with any part of the hemp plant. Medical cannabis, not so much of a history with that. 2019, the Act. And it's a licensed activity, it's highly regulated. Cultivation, manufacture and supply of medical cannabis, there's a number of licenses you can have under that legislation. Most of them require those bottom two, minimum quality standard and good manufacturing practices. They're a fairly high barrier in the legislation for companies to get into. There is one there, the supply of starting material. You don't need those standards for that. The downside, I guess, at the moment is that starting material is just that, just the flower, and you can export that and you can supply it domestically, but you can't do any processing to it unless you go under those standards. So it's a big jump. So industrial hemp regulations covers that side of it. Medical cannabis covers all this, including the low dose CBD. The bit in the middle, natural products, they're lagging a bit behind in their legislation. The government has just in March said that we would expect the new legislation by the end of this year or early next year. Potential for industrial hemp, I think this is, everybody will have seen the picture on the right there, 50,000 uses for hemp, and I don't know that very many people believe that exactly, but there's enough uses for hemp to make it interesting, and there's enough uses that haven't been exploited yet that there's plenty of opportunity. If you go to the left, in the top left there, the oil that we've had for, as I say, 15 years, we're producing hemp oil. More recently, hemp food. With the fibre decortication plant online, things like hempcrete are going to increase in popularity. And then with climate change and international trends, things like biochar and biomass are also likely to become to the fore a bit. This is labelled potential opportunities, but I guess it's more things to be aware of as well as opportunities. So on the to build the New Zealand industry or to establish it in a decent way, the genetics is very important, the seed is important, the local varieties is important. So knowing the varieties, and hemp is not quite domesticated yet as a plant, and so there's some way to go to get the hemp plant fully domesticated, so you can plant it and get exactly what you expect every time. May not be possible, but most of the time. New Zealand innovative agriculture and agribusiness, that's one of our strengths, and we've got to play to that. We've got to be innovative in this market. New Zealand is just one small country growing hemp, so we have to do something different. We have to identify where our uniqueness is in our products. And with the medical cannabis and cannabis growing coming on stream, and the fact that medical cannabis doesn't like their plants pollinated, they're not going to want a seed crop down the road from their medical cannabis crop. So there will be some regional separation for that reason. There'll be regional separation also because of infrastructure. We've got a fibre plant down in Christchurch, so don't have one in the North Island. Maybe you won't grow fibre in the North Island, you'll grow it in Canterbury. And there'll be separation as well, just from the soil types, the climate and other things. Farming systems, we're good at that. We've got good systems in our dairy systems. How can we do the same with hemp? How can we integrate the hemp and the current farming systems? Niche, high-value products. We're a small player. We don't need a great volume of product to go through to get value from it. As I said earlier, trending, probably biomass, carbon capture, extractives, that's in there to sort of highlight the fact that there could be extractives from outside of the medical space, outside of the therapeutical space that could be of interest. So phytoremediation. We've still got some of the big curly ones that still need some work on the R&D. So for the seed and grain sector, seed shatter, loss of seed, the straw utilisation, they still grow a little bit of straw if they can get better value from that. On the fibre and herd side, still the big ones are retting and the decortication. Medical cannabis side and the potential here, this, as I say, is relatively new to New Zealand. We're not known for a pharmaceutical industry, and so it's a new situation. There's a lot of players that have got into it. Some of those names are manufacturing medicine. Some of them are a little bit off the side, but they're all involved in the medical marijuana side of it. Global growth in medical cannabis is rated at about 27%, or ranging from about 22 to 27, depending on which articles you read. So there's certainly growth in the industry. Because of the legislation, because of the fact that we're prescription only, and because of the standards that New Zealand have set, some of these companies probably won't survive. They're going to be export focused because they need to be to get value from what they're doing. The legislation was set up to give access to cannabis for New Zealanders at a fair price. It's not really doing that at the moment, but it's getting tweaked along the way. So another indication of the size of the industry, and just a couple of charts are pulled out. So these predictions are hard to know whether how much truth there is in some of these predictions. And I guess a word of warning 2019, CBD in the United States was the big thing. Farmers went out and planted a lot of hemp. They estimate that 20,000 acres could have supplied the entire need for the USA, and that was quite generous, giving one person quite a reasonable daily dose. And 2019, farmers planted 146,000 hectares of cannabis. So some of that has hurt farmers. Some of it's pointed them more in a direction of, say, the hemp side of things. But we can learn from that. New Zealand can learn from those things. So it's not a situation where I think it's a problem for us. It's just that we need to be aware that this is, in some places, been a bit of a gold rush, and like all gold rushes, there's a few boom and bust situations where people jump in expecting a fortune, and that doesn't always eventuate. I'll finish off and just put up the last slide, which is just an indication, and this is taken from a different presentation, but of the CRIs and where we sit. The government CRIs, there's 5 at least that are involved in the hemp space: Agri-Research, Plant and Food, Scion, ESR, Callaghan Innovation. We're all talking with each other, we're all involved, so reach out to any one of us if you have a need for any research. Some of these organisations focus on different areas, but we're all tracking the hemp industry and looking at it. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll hand over to whoever's next.
The next speaker that I'm going to introduce is Pamjit. Pamjit is one of the companies that is actually present here on the Lincoln University campus and in the co-working space here at B-Link Innovation. We heard Peter talk about the plant is still in the process of being domesticated. One of the things that Green Lab and Pamjit and his team are doing, they're actually looking at the genetic side and make sure that they get more understanding of that plant. Because if you are going to pursue medical use, you probably want standardization. So if I have a headache and I want to take an aspirin, then I want the aspirin to do the same thing every single day. I don't want to have any variation. Well, that's what Pamjit's team is actually doing. So without any further ado, I will...
Thanks, Wim, for the kind introduction. And thank you very much, the online people and the physically present here. And thanks, Peter, for setting up the scene, making a bifurcation between hemp and medical cannabis. I will be putting this medical cannabis industry under microscope. And I'm a Lincoln alumni. So did a PhD from here. So this company was founded by the scientists. So then we have to go to business people to take that science to commercialization. So my main role is on the both sides of the ditch in Australia and New Zealand, drive this industry. So I'm working in this industry from last 7 years, and I'm a proud Kiwi. So a lot of those windfalls will fall here, and we are very strong in innovation as from Agri-Research. Peter already have that background. So I will be putting that. So my focus will be medical cannabis, but I am also working with Hemp Victoria as agronomy chair, voluntary, but in last 3 years, big learning what happened in the field. And presently, Australian government is trying to put up hemp industry through CRC. CRC are their cooperative research centers, where government gave up to $100 million investment with science and industry to put up a new industry up. So our bigger cousin and our microscopic innovation here, together we can be the leaders in hemp and medical cannabis. So let's go here. So this is again another estimates about the industry. So that's a total cannabis industry, recreational, hemp, and medical cannabis. So it's more than 100 billion according to these estimates. So this is very good looking, good field. Go in Oceania, so it's 2.7 billion. So presently, with this latest report, they say it's growing at annual compounded growth rate of 34%. So very good feeling. But again, every industry has its challenges. So when I came first and started reading about it, I was working with Bear Crop Science in Australia as their breeder. So my idea was to live in Melbourne with the family more, rather flying all over the country to find new wheat breeding varieties. So when I see few papers like in USA, if you might be knowing, US is not federally legal for medical cannabis. It's still a prohibited substance for them. It has a history behind it, like 100 years back when pharmaceutical industry was taking shape. This plant was a lot of background noise. So all the bureaucracy there did it. So for 100 years, no research happened. Still, it's a prohibited substance. But the states, out of 50 states of US, 36 are now medically legal. So it means pharmacies and directors, medical directors, they are prescribing it. Sorry, doctors. I'm a director myself. So presently, when this paper came in Nature, actually, so there's a big mismatch between researchers and the industry. When I say that, like we have our core strength in plant genetics, as Wim has said, and but who is the customer? When you are running a commercial company, the customer is the patient. So plant to patient connection is very important. Medical doctors and plant scientists, they have to plug in. So this paper came in 2017 in Nature. And in US, federally, only Mississippi University is allowed to do research on this plant, nobody else. So you have to go to Mississippi. So in last 30 years, they have done a lot of research on plant side. And then the states become legal. So state medical cannabis versus Mississippi plants or camivores, as Peter was saying, they don't match. And when I say that they don't match, these lines in this paper in Nature is important. So thus may yield limited insights into the chemical, biological, and pharmacological properties and medical potential of a material that's available in the state market. State means there are states, like 30 states. Investigation is urgently needed on the full diversity of cannabis chemotype known to be available to the public. So total disconnect. That 30 years research, I will not say it has gone down the drain. It's only academic. And it has to commercialize somehow. And they realized a bit late. And then you keep following what's happening in US. Oh, in 2020, scientists are still nipped in the bud because they can't imagine. So I set the scene with this scientific background for this plant because it was prohibited that you can't do much research. And we are very lucky in New Zealand and Australia, this plant can be researched. Now, in one single line, commercialization is top in Australia. Our regulations are very good for research. That's one reason Green Lab was born here in New Zealand. So Green Lab is a New Zealand company, and all the Australian work we do, they are all subsidiaries. So that's where I operate between both the countries. And Blink is just a family, so I was stationed here during the COVID because I could not go back. And I'm very lucky my wife, Ginny, is here today with me. So hopefully these flights remain open and we can fast track this industry. That's our vision about whole thing. So let's now say what's in New Zealand. So currently there are 36 medical cannabis licenses. When I say 36, it's from the MOH website. They keep going plus minus, and some companies don't want to tell that they are doing. So, and presently, majority of growers, as Peter has said, they are growing in the field, glasshouse, or in the growth chambers. I come in detail on that, what it means. So you're producing a medicine. So some people think, like in that American paper 30 years, that you grow it and you're producing like cucumber or tomatoes. That's okay up to that, but we are not only after flower. There is 150. From 100 Peter, it has gone to 150 now, and it might be 152 when we are talking. So there are 152 cannabinoids. This is the secondary metabolite in the plant, secondary, like there's primary metabolites in the plant is sugar, carbohydrates, all those things are here. Secondary metabolites are produced by the plant due to stress. Plant is stressed, and that stress is the medicine. So these are the cannabinoids and terpenes. They together combine, create synergies, and in our body, there are the effects. And medical doctors until last 10 years were not told about that we have an endocannabinoid system in our body. Thanks, Peter, for touching on it. So that endocannabinoid system is still not in medical colleges. So now they are putting endocannabinoid studies. And presently, a doctor has to pay about $3,000 to do that course from the experts. What's the endocannabinoid system? So body has a cannabinoid inside, and when that balance goes away, we have problems with our sleep, with our current lifestyle, and we have those fits in children. And already anecdotal evidence was there without any clinical trials that people get better. Sometimes they get better, sometimes they don't. That's a problem. So presently, people are here, those 36 licenses, most of the growers are growing it without any code of practice. Imagine there is a code of practice for producing food. And for medical cannabis, we still don't know it will be a medicine. It will be going to an immunocompromised patient. And this industry, still in the end, they can't sell it. As Ministry of Health has very stringent medicine kind of regulations. Same is in Australia with TGA, which controls federally, like it's a therapeutic goods administration there. So you should not have any heavy metals, any microbes, alpha toxins, ochratoxins. If they go in the body, patient might die of that rather than of its condition which it's having. That's what's the problem with the illicit market presently is. So then heavy metals, microbes. The third thing are the contaminants or pesticides. Big thing. If you are having paracetamol, as you Wim said, that's consistently, repeatedly meet those quality standards. Simple hammering thing is we have to meet those. So presently industry, I am meeting a lot of growers. So when you talk this, they confuse it between the hemp and the medical cannabis. I'm coming next on that what's the part of hemp in terms of medicine. But rest of the thing, Peter, you made very clear from fiber side and food side. There are different regulations. So it's very stringent industry. So next thing is that, so what's the challenge? When I put the slides heading, New Zealand industry challenge is Green Lab challenge. And I can say with confidence with one of my scientists, Jaswinder, sitting there, whatever research we are doing presently, it should be done by the universities or the Crown Research Institutes. Presently, no systematic research is happening in New Zealand where they have a licensed facility somewhere where they are studying the local New Zealand land races for their API, active pharmaceutical ingredient in the plant. So we are carrying out from last year very detailed research, but we are a commercial company, so we also see on the other side how with the stakeholders we deal, so we can keep putting more scientists on that. That's our vision on that. So our challenge is New Zealand medical cannabis industry challenge, and we are meeting it, and we are meeting it with the right kind of collaborators or the partners. So how we are doing? So we are only interested in female plants. Like in hemp, there are male and female, and pollination happens, seed comes. That's a totally different thing. But even if seed comes, there are still some APIs. But the main focus is on the female plant, and you have to cut, copy, paste the female plant, then you get a cutting from it. Then you get a cutting, and then it roots in 2 weeks, about. After rooting, then you have to make it a very vegetatively strong plant. And it's very light sensitive, as Peter told, that if you're doing in the field, you do only one crop, because there's a one season change. And Brad is sitting here, so in hemp, you can only do it once. But inside you root it in 2 weeks, you make it, give it 18 hours of light, and then it vegetatively grow. Then you change the light in a controlled environment to 12 hours. And immediately it starts flowering mode. So when it's done, then all cannabis plants are not same. So I just see from there are 7, 8. They are matured after 8 weeks. So then we put all the scientific rigor at that point. Presently, we dry them, so we now know the genetics. We know what it is, and we are very lucky in New Zealand, and we learned from Australian experience. There you can't go to any illicit grower and get a plant, not allowed. Here, the Ministry of Health has a declaration that if you have some genetics, you can declare it under the license and you can study it. So that's a really like a dream come true for any medical cannabis researcher or scientist. So we have to really do it to find those plants which have a pharmaceutical or medicine value. So presently that's happening. So once you know the genetics, next thing is very important and to be done in a very faster way where Australia was lacking in the start. So we have a HPLC and GCMS. HPLC do all the cannabinoids in the plant, and GCMS do all the terpenes. Terpenes are a combination with those cannabinoids. Together, they do a medical effect. So presently, we are doing 13 cannabinoids and 21 terpenes in any plant. So we in our team call it an assembly line. You give me something here, I put there, and in the end, we know what's in it. So it takes to us about 16 weeks to get that thing done, and we keep evaluating things on this assembly line. And it's a big teamwork with scientists and my team here that we can do any plant and tell about what is its chemistry, how to link a genetics with the chemistry. That's the main thing. So our goal changed, our business strategy changed over last year. So we want to be center of excellence for cannabinoids, especially what happened in the US when the markets are not legalized. This is a one-time opportunity, and about 1,000 scientists all over the world working in different places, but this is the way. So how we can do? So we have about 30 years of experience behind us, and I'm come with 7 years of medical cannabis experience in a legalized market in Australia. So next thing is, the flower is only the medical cannabis. Rest of the plant is waste. But this waste is a controlled waste according to the license. You can't throw it out. So we are now trying to use that waste to make feed or fertilizer out of this controlled growing, because it's every time same. So we are working with Auckland Uni on that. Come on next slide on that. So we have a deep knowledge on this regulation side in both the countries. That's very important. For example, even if 1 gram of thing goes away, your license is under cloud, and the whole work you are doing, it goes away. So our team is very importantly keeping those things, and we have learned it from Australian experience that how efficiently that can be done so science can take place. So it's happening very well, and congratulations to my team, and Jaswinder is heading that side of things. So we are just only 14 months on the ground. Although the company is 3 years old, I just put a snapshot. So when I see that plant to patient, we thought we should go to the patient rather than go to the plant first. So in January 21, we had an agreement with one of the largest medical prescribing pharmacy based in Melbourne, and they were having 40% market at that time. I'm not sure how much they are now, but this year, by March, we had a close to $1 million revenue with our white label contract with them. Thanks to them, that's a big relationship, where we will be going back later to them to telling, oh, these are the plants with more cannabinoids. So that relationship works like that. And in February, we started here, we declared some local genetics. We have access to genetics from India also, which there are the land races. And soon this program will keep evaluating those things in this assembly line. And in the end, we will have enough to do breeding to make a unicorn, so-called. So, which might be curing a condition, because this plant historically was curing 50 conditions. And presently, it can be prescribed for 50 medical conditions, depending upon a patient in Australia, New Zealand doesn't get benefit from their current medicine given by the doctor. So doctors have to decide that. So that's the side where a lot of challenges there. So after looking this thing when we were doing, we are very thankful to Ministry of Primary Industries. They come as a partner. They say, oh, code of practice can be made. So we thought, oh, it's a real, we are very lucky in that way. So we will be giving this growing recipe, I call it, to the growers. So they get a targeted potency of that medical cannabis presently, which they are growing without any quality standards. 80% of them. Few larger companies you showed, they are on top of it, but their focus is what they are going to sell. This one is more like university kind of work. So we are filling that gap. So, and with Auckland University, we already have funded a PhD studentship through Callahan, where they are working on the ways to make feed or fertilizer. So we will be stopping this waste, any cannabinoids going into our waterways, other things. And this is main focus. If you see in Australia, they don't care. So what they do presently, when they grow medical cannabis in a controlled facility, they burn it, incineration. Sooner they have to rely on this thing, on the climate thing. And thankfully, the government has changed there. And this research might have a value there. And we will put more scientists on ground if we are successful. So now I'm very proud of this thing. When I'm declaring this, I talked to my directors and our funders. So we found few germplasm here in our facility, in our work, which is producing 40% higher yield per square meter of cannabinoids, not the dry flower, than the industry. So we are sitting at cusp of that. Again, I'm coming how it was possible, not between us, with our stakeholders, our collaborators. And it's producing 30% less waste. As a plant scientist, it will be interesting. So plant puts its energy to make flowers, right? And in flower, that's the currently, commercially, you get money out of it. So in Australia, I have seen they are mostly doing 50% waste. The reason for that more waste is it's all Canadian, you can say all the Canadian genetics came there because they can't use their local genetics. Here we can use the local genetics. It's pretty clever in a way. Just imagine if you are growing 2,000 square meters and here producing 40% extra and 30% less waste. Here we are working with Lincoln as sporters, as the big sport to start growing in a niche facility, and with our export, already having export pathways in Australia. That might be really good. So yeah, these are the people who in last 16 months, especially with COVID, and my co-directors, one of Rupinder, based here in New Zealand, he's one of the waste experts. So he was very instrumental in putting these things on the ground with me last year. And the Valens is a Canadian company from which we get our white label products made presently. And Medifarm is based in Victoria. They do some of our products also. So then it goes to Canvalate, one of the medical cannabis pharmacy where doctors prescribe our products. And we are working with the University of Otago to make new products as we know more and more cannabinoids consistently, repeatedly coming in our genetics. And CDA Clinics is another one based in Brisbane. They are another largest one, and they are on the stock exchange. So we are just only happened last month. Ministry of Primary Industries, they gave us a vision, they gave us a satisfaction in a way that we will give back something to the New Zealanders. And we are running this MPI program from 9 months successfully, and thanks to the team on ground. And Auckland Uni, yeah, we are doing the waste research with them. That's what color is, but really nice. So it's from Canada because somehow Canada is a little bit confused by putting recreational and medical cannabis together. But Purple Farm Genetics has about 90 medical cannabis strains before it become recreational there. Lincoln University is Lincoln University. That's our vision to do everything. And thanks whatever the support we are getting in that. Hopefully this relationship will flourish further. And so when I was saying we did not have any business people, so we always get consultancy from Sprint Capitals. They have raised medical cannabis companies in Australian Stock Exchange. Very lucky to talk to them with these relations with one director based there. And Cornwall's Capital is working, it's a lawyer company working with a lot of medical cannabis companies in terms of regulations in Europe and also in Australia. So we have a BDO here as our accountants. New Zealand Medical Cannabis Council is a nice place where we throw those ideas from Australia to all our Kiwi stakeholders here. Very good form. So we always attend its meeting, never miss it. So yeah, this is just I just got a snapshot from my website. So now for Australian patients, not for New Zealand ones, you go there and any Australian patient can get registered on that website, and then he can consulted by a doctor, then they know that can you have it according to the TGA regulations, and you get your medicine there. So presently, Australia has 200,000 patients. These are only 20,000 14 months back. So reason is they are coming back when they get some benefit. But again, the downside is clinical trials are still taking place. And with this kind of benefit, the government allow it to be prescribed without clinical trial results coming in. So that's very important. So how to keep this thing on the doctor on your side to be confident, consistently, repeatedly produce same plant by stamping those cannabinoids. They are doing only two, as Peter said, THC and CBD. We found plants with 3 cannabinoids. So we can stamp it for 3 and about 3 terpenes in that. So more and more clinical trials will be successful from the first slide of US that you put it to the patients. You go to the doctors and then clinical trial is the next thing. If that API is really beneficial for any condition. That's where the science is happening presently. So that's another, this is another relationship which started with a casual visit here at Blink with the CEO of Helios Therapeutics. Helios Therapeutics is one of the largest medical cannabis company here in New Zealand, and they have a vision. And they have a vision on the patient side. They have their own GMP manufacturing facilities, and they are developing products, and there's a lot of synergies we can together create. And we are very thankful to the Carmen's vision, the CEO there, and we were very lucky or very proud that one of their non-executive directors, Dr. Sorry, what's the name? I'm wrong with the name. Eric Kalak? Okay. Yeah. So he was the past president of Pain Management Society of New Zealand. So he is also working, presented papers on spinal cord injury versus what's the cannabis, how cannabis relieve that condition. So that's a quite good relationship. In the middle, you can see that's our research scientist, Christine here. Today her daughter is not very well. So yeah, that relationship will go forward in terms of medical cannabis breeding and research. This might be, it might put us in the forefront in coming years. So that collaboration we really value. So now in Australia, quickly, so I'm doing this CRC hemp bed. So we are very proud that Green Lab is one of the only private company in Australia and New Zealand. They are the one of the core team with all the universities. Southern Cross is already doing good work. Western Sydney University is working a lot on complementary medicine, so that fits in well with us also. So I am one of the sector experts for developing that CRC bed, and it's for 10 years. You get about they want to put this hemp industry from fiber food side, and when they are doing it, they try to put this petrochemical building materials away. Textile industry is mostly shifting to India with these labor issues. So a lot of technology transfer will happen in India to make clothes and textiles. And we are very humble and very proud that Dr. Surinder Tandon, who worked for Agri-Research, earlier it was RONS, Wool Research Organization, New Zealand, and he has a 27 years experience. And Surinder Tandon is an international consultant in India and in few European countries, and he will create a lot of synergies. And the CRC team really respect, and Christopher Hurian and Stuart Gordon already working with Surinder from last 20 years, which is great in a way. And Australia has just put a free trade agreement with India. So there's a big chance that all the duties will go away, and cotton will be slowly replaced for textile, for hemp. What's good for New Zealand? Cotton can't be grown in New Zealand, hemp can be. So that's the next stage where New Zealand come into this picture. Thanks, Dr. Surinder. And yeah, this is just my house, and cannabis grow widely there. It's still illegal, but it's 300 kilometers away from New Delhi, Indian capital. But 700 kilometer temperature goes from sub-zero to 47. So just imagine what I'm trying to see here. These plants have a more pharmaceutical profile in that. How can I say that? Because 60 years back, people took the plants here to the Western countries, illicitly growing in a back room only for getting high, THC. And slowly that pharmaceutical benefit lost in our plants here. So we try to bring it back. That's my another dream from India. And so Sun Spectra is very good for sustainability. That's what in India we have proposed to our partner in the uni, that what you do, you grow it in a fully controlled environment in this facility, and then you grow in glasshouse. Compare that Sun Spectra, rest everything is constant, put a lab there, and then it might go in glass houses. So crop has not to be thrown away. It meets all those quality standards. That's next dream. And thank you very much. And I'm very happy if anybody want to talk to me. It's all collaborations which bring us to this place, and we will keep doing it. Thank you very much.
Pamjit, thank you very much. This is exciting. I don't think that anybody was worried about that, Pamjit. We go to our last speaker, and that is not less exciting, so there is still more to come. Brothers Green, Brad, will be talking to us. And the interesting thing that they did, they actually already brought hemp and hemp products to consumers. So they have already found that route. So we are really interested in what Brad has to tell us. Thank you.
Hope that's on. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brad Lake. I'm from a company based in Christchurch called the Brothers Green, and on top of that also part of our group is a company called Mainland Hemp. So for the last 5 years I've been in the hemp industry, predominantly in the food space. I used to be a rural banker up in North Canterbury, and in that time learnt a lot about probably some of the limitations that are placed on our farmers, and particularly addressing a lot of the environmental and social perceptions of New Zealand farming, and just sort of lack of options. And that really drove me to have a look at what else could we do here in New Zealand, and hemp became I guess my answer to, or what I thought would be a great answer to many of our rural communities' problems. So where I sit at the moment, I've been full-time in what I'd say in the retail hemp space since 2019, and I guess in that time certainly learned a lot about retail hemp products, particularly in food, and now moving into supplements. And I guess where I see hemp, and I know a few of you who are in the room, depending on whether you're on the hemp side or the medical side, is I see a real need for separation between THC products and then hemp and where it is. So this is where I really see the future of hemp in New Zealand, is hemp being classed as a food, and then anything above the 0.35% containing THC to be maintained under the Medicines Act. So, and this is where I see the biggest restriction and the biggest hurdle for and challenge for our industry at this stage. So again, probably already talked about it, but from our opinion, I think the hemp industry is very early stages, with particularly processing and things like that. There's not a heck of a lot. There's really not a lot of contract manufacturing available. There's really only 2 processors in the South Island, Midlands and ourselves, and Midlands sort of, they've got all their own growers, and we've got ours at the moment, but apart from that, if someone wanted to grow hemp in the South Island, they either have to come to us or send it up to the North Island for processing. And I guess for us, that whole change of legislation in 2018, where we shifted from hemp seed oil as legal, with everything else only for animal feed, and then shifting into hemp seeds being fit for adults, but then being not illegal for animals. sort of just gives you a perception of just who's dealing with the current legislation, and the fact that it sits with the Ministry of Health, particularly for hemp, I believe is the largest roadblock and largest challenge for our industry. And yeah, it's certainly, it's been a frustrating period, sort of just seeing the lack of progress around around allowing the hemp industry to actually flourish and to actually find its feet. And this is what we're really pushing for, is to see, a real differentiation between hemp and medical high THC hemp cannabis. So today, obviously we've heard from Pamjit about the medical side of cannabis, particularly sort of in the high THC space, where I'd like to see, and where I guess my experience has come from is specifically in hemp, and I'd like to see, based on what I'm going to talk about today, this is based on high THC medical cannabis being classed under the Medicines Act, and anything classed as hemp being under MPI as a food product. And this allows us to look into two different product markets for hemp as a food product. That's looking at it as industrial hemp, so that's sort of your broadacre, your large scale, what you'd sort of normally see out in the paddock, hemp production, and that's for fibres, seed, root, and what I'd like to see is flour included in that as well. And then probably moving in towards probably closer to what Pamjit was doing, but looking at therapeutic hemp products, so small scale, indoor, outdoor, much higher intensity, and higher cost, but also very high quality products at the same time. So I guess one of the things we've learned is that just because it's from hemp doesn't mean that it's going to sell. So we really need to be focused here in New Zealand on creating premium plant-based ingredients, and actually focusing on how these products are actually addressing problems for our customers. So and under the industrial hemp side, so I guess in the food and supplement space, this is the angle that we're taking now. So I guess we're really looking at, all right, what are those, when we're talking about what is the actual functionality of the hemp seed and the hemp seed ingredients that we're producing, really starting to focus on, the key benefits. So what are these ingredients actually addressing for the customer, and then really starting to hone in and understand, what's the actual research saying about, how much of our product is not just fats and proteins and carbs, but actually looking at the micronutrient content of the product and really being able to market that. And I think that's where the science is really starting to take shape. So this is the direction that we're really heading. We're shifting our focus from the fact that we're growing a hemp product to we're growing a very high quality, premium, micronutrient dense New Zealand ingredient that just happens to be from hemp. And as you can see, this is just the oil, this is just a seed extract. This is all grown up in Calverton or in mid-Canterbury, and there's some very marketable aspects of this ingredient that I think New Zealand really needs to focus on. I think it's got huge potential for this country if we can get it out of from underneath Ministry of Health control. So and just treat it like any other crop, like wheat or barley. Same again, this is something we're actually really excited about, which is a new product that we've created, which is a golden hemp protein. This is a lot different than the typical green protein that you've probably seen produced from hemp. So it's produced from the dehulled seed or the hemp heart. And as you can see, it's got some, the micronutrient panel for this is what we believe is highly marketable and quite powerful. So you've got sort of 62% protein, and then when you look at this micronutrient content, this is just a 30-gram serving, and the amount of magnesium, iron and zinc in this ingredient, I believe, is got a lot more benefits than probably, particularly in the plant-based space, that you probably see from pea and rice protein, which are all out of Europe, and just don't have the same micronutrient content as what we're seeing out of this plant. So again, this is what we really need to start to look into and support, I believe. New Zealand's got an amazing space in the red and white protein space, amazing reputation, and I think it's time we got into the green protein space as well. So on the other side, I guess that was the industrial side, what we're seeing sort of in that food, in that seed space where we're at, and then I think on the other side, where we'd like to see hemp, classed as a novel food like it is in Europe and deregulated like it is in the US, who funnily enough led us into prohibition and are now streaking ahead of us out of prohibition when we're still sort of floundering around wondering what we're going to do. So what we'd really like to see is that, give farmers and growers the ability to use every part of the plant and make full utilisation of the crop. And as you can see here, ignoring sort of the THC side, all these cannabinoids here, and as Pamjit said, there's only over 152 of them now. There's a huge amount of potential therapeutic products that we could make available to the public at a low cost, and still amazingly high quality, if we were allowed to. So currently 98% of our crop is essentially wasted. We're unable to use the flower, which is containing a lot of these beneficial compounds, which have been proven to be safe, proven to have little to no side effects, and can be taken for long-term periods with no issues. So that's sort of on the therapeutic side. So I guess for me and where I see the future of hemp, I think the future of hemp in New Zealand really sits with the government at the moment. I see, the future of hemp going two ways. It remains as it is at the moment, and it moves into a very corporatised space. So very few businesses control, almost like a monopolised industry. We're classed as a medicine, except for the seed for some reason. A small number of growers, high barrier to entry, limited access for farmers. And farmers who are growing hemp, currently under quite strict regulations with the licence, only able to utilise 2 or 3% of the actual plant that they're growing, with the rest of it, essentially being wasted. And then a continuation of limited access for these powerful therapeutics. So the pharmaceutical model where you only really get access to medicine when you're sick. So rather than actually being able to have access to ingredients or therapeutics that actually maintain your health. So that's one way, which is sort of where we sort of sit, I believe we sit at the moment. And the way that I really think the future of cannabis should go is deregulation. So all hemp products, hemp plants under 0.35% THC classed as food, sit with MPI, same as wheat or barley. The entire plant is available for utilisation and able to be sold by farmers. That includes seed, fibre, flower, root, whatever, and that's without restrictions or regulations from a licensing perspective. And really giving our rural community and our farming industry the confidence to go ahead and invest in this industry and actually get into it, knowing that there's a clear roadmap ahead of them for full utilisation of the plant, without this real limbo period that we're in at the moment, where we really don't understand, what can we actually do with it, what's allowed to be sold, the fact that you can't even, all of a sudden you've got this amazing product, but you can't actually do anything with it. And that impacts actual motivation to plant the crop and revenue back inside the farm gate, which is something I really want to see, is farmers actually being paid for what they're actually doing. And then actually giving the public access to these natural therapeutic products. So we live in a society which is extremely sick at the moment, and it's only getting sicker. We've got a completely our health system is in not a great state, and I really believe that giving widespread access to these products, from the hemp plant, can make a massive difference in not just healing but also maintaining current health status. So I think, and that's where Pamjit and the research around the science behind how cannabinoids are working is going to become really, really important, because we need that in behind it. But I also think that by being classed as a food, we're giving widespread access to these compounds in their natural state, at a cost that's widely accessible to most of the population. So I guess, from if we were to look at it from, the current opportunities and what's being done overseas, if this was to, come through into New Zealand, we would see complete deregulation. Well, I think, on the therapeutic side, you've got, your really targeted pharmaceutical grade products targeted for specific diseases, with, controlled dosages, same dose every time, and, prescribed by doctors, and looking for specific outcomes. And then you've got your everyday supplements, so your muscle rubs, your pain relief, your joint support. You think of the amount of people who are on Nurofen or taking Panadol all the time, absolutely wreaking havoc on their liver and their detoxification organs, whereas they get access to products which are as effective, if not more effective, with much less side effects. And on the industrial hemp side, really moving into the plant protein space, so we're seeing a huge lift in demand for plant proteins around the world. And then, looking at, these high-value seed oil products, combining them with potentially algae, looking at omega-3 products, joint support, and then just, range of skincare, cosmetics, and anti-inflammatory skin treatments. Then you've got the hemp fibre. So, what we're seeing at the moment is, there's large industries growing around the world for the hemp herd, so hemp building and things like that, which we're seeing is much more environmentally friendly than using things like concrete and traditional building materials. And then also, what I believe is a big opportunity for New Zealand is that in that fibre space. So really looking at using what is an incredible product in wool and actually really lifting the value of that and demonstrating what it can do. So that's where I sort of see, that's sort of what's being done overseas at the moment from a basic level. You've got the 50,000 uses or whatever. But this is where I see, this can be done right now, with the right government support and capital. So the big one for me is opportunities for New Zealand. So what is the potential for hemp in a deregulated state for New Zealand? The big one for me is in the plant-based food space. So I believe there's no other food sector that's growing as fast as the plant-based space around the world. Ignore all your preconceived ideas about diet, nutrition. It's a growing space. New Zealand needs to be a part of it. I think leveraging New Zealand's reputation for red protein in the form of meat and white protein in the form of milk, and slipping in green protein alongside that, I think we've got a great story there to tell, and large demand for that product. And then also just looking at I guess the bioactive ingredient side. So New Zealand's reputation for clean, wild sort of products. You think of Manuka, green mussel, kawa kawa. How can we leverage sort of that New Zealand clean green reputation from a high quality, high premium supplement ingredient space? The next one is I really think New Zealand needs to get back into manufacturing fibres, high quality premium fibres here in New Zealand. We've got a great natural resource in wool, both crossbred and fine wool, that I think works really well with hemp. This is a hemp top, this is a hemp linen. Unfortunately, at the moment, this is all made, not unfortunately, but China grows 50% of the world's hemp at the moment, and a majority of that goes into fibre, so they're sort of the largest fibre producers. But I think with what New Zealand Yarn's doing and everything, I think really investment into that space, and utilising, whether that is wool or mohair or possum or whatever, getting really into that high quality fibre space. Again, this making healthy natural products grown in New Zealand available to as many New Zealanders as possible, and not restricting it to prescriptions, and classing it as a medicine. So I think the ability for us to address a lot of common conditions, and this is what we're seeing from our angle in the food and supplement space, is there are so many people out there who are sick of taking pharmaceutical drugs that aren't working. They've got stiff joints, they've got inflammatory skin conditions, they've got chronic pain, and they are desperate for products. And here we are sitting on an absolute gold mine of potential therapeutic products that we could make widely available for not a lot of money. And these people coming in and seeing huge benefits by just taking our 250ml bottle of oil, a tablespoon of that a day is having amazing effects, and the feedback we're getting is incredible, and that's with us out really unable, not quite yet, really diving into how we can enhance the benefits of those products. And then I think another one is by deregulating the industry and removing a lot of the barriers to entry around licensing and that whole Ministry of Health control, and putting it with MPI, I think we could see a decrease in the cost of general hemp products, hemp seed products, hemp food products, and make these much more widely available. So for example, it currently costs us. We sell our hemp seeds for between sort of $25-30 a kilo, de-hulled hemp hearts, which is the only thing we're allowed to sell. We could be selling the whole hemp seed, for $5 or $6 a kilo to most people, which is much more accessible to much more of the population. And I think that's incredibly important now, because we're so many people now are reliant on imported micronutrient, just crap food. It can't even be classed as food. And I think it's really important that we need to eat from the country that we live in. Big passion of mine is the farming and I guess diversifying the whole farming side. So this is where I really see the other side of hemp, obviously talking about the retail side, but I think we need to give our farmers the opportunity to diversify their farming system. So, constantly being battered with told to do something different or change their system or do whatever, but without actually providing a solution, I think is very short-sighted and doesn't achieve anything. So first of all, we need to grow the industry and deregulate it to a point where it's very accessible for farmers to be planting hemp, knowing that it's contracts available and there's processing capability, easily accessible, just as there is with wheat, barley. There's an open market. You don't need contracts or anything like that. I think the opportunity to really improve our water and soil quality with hemp. We're seeing just with our farms up in Culverton, we're seeing the following crops from hemp are significantly better. And I believe what Lincoln University can do, and Massey and these institutions around really understanding how come hemp is having such a powerful impact on soil quality, taking up potential nutrients that are stored in the ground that pasture species don't have access to, breaking up compacted soil, and then just driving carbon back into the soil and feeding the soil life, feeding the mycorrhizal fungi, feeding the carbon back into the soil, and how is that going to affect farmers potential revenue down the track and meeting their environmental regulations. Another big thing for us is carbon farming. So how can we allocate carbon credits to growing hemp crops? From our perspective, we're sort of seeing that, from the research, some of the papers and stuff that we're seeing, that most hemp crops are probably sequestering between 8 and 15 tonnes of carbon per hectare. This is only 3 months, and this is what we'd put, 15 to 18 tonne is probably what we'd see typically from a pine block over 12 months. So I really think that the carbon farming industry in New Zealand should be massive, and I think farmers should be paid significantly for the carbon that they're sequestering, not only offsetting the carbon that they're already emitting, but also going into a space where they're actually carbon negative farming, which again tells a great story for our international market. Bridging the urban and rural divide. Now, we currently live in a society where very few people in the urban population know or have access to a farm. We had a field day 2 years ago up on our farm up in Culverton. We had 70 to 80 people from Christchurch all come up and essentially attend a farming field day. And in my experience in the farming industry, I have never seen people from the urban population turn up to a dairy or a red meat farming day. It's always been farmers, and I think the interest from the urban population in hemp and what it can do from across the board in the fibre, food, textile space, I think allows we can invite that community into the rural space and really get them involved. Next year we're going to put on a field day again, and we're going to make it much bigger. We're going to try and get as many, aim to get 500 to 600 people up to the farm, all from Christchurch, look around the farm, understand who the farmers are, who's growing their food, what it's like to be on the land, and experience what it's like to be in a hemp crop, because I'm sure, many of you you might not have even seen a cannabis plant, let alone been in a 10 or 15 hectare paddock, and it's a completely unbelievable experience for many people who have never experienced cannabis before. So I think, highlighting that the farming community in New Zealand, I believe, is doing an amazing job, and we need to give them more tools to be able to address the problems that we're facing, and look at that problem collectively rather than isolating a large group of an incredibly important group of part of our population. And I think when I first started my job up in North Canterbury in 2016, we're at the worst drought we'd had in 30 years. On top of that, we're at the bottom of the dairy downturn. So farmers were importing palm kernel from Indonesia. It was the cheapest, most widely accessible stock feed grazing option during a drought, and widely used in the dairy sector, which I just believe is absolute bullshit. We should not be importing deforestation byproduct into New Zealand to feed our stock when we've got a fantastic product here like hemp, that can be easily fed to stock, which not only just keeps the stock fed but actually enhances the quality of the products by improving that micronutrient product access. On top of that, we had, I unfortunately didn't put it in the slide, but we had a couple of years ago, we grew a dryland crop up, and we grew a couple of dryland crops. There's a photo of an aerial shot of the entire, I guess the Amiri Basin, and then you've got this, which is all browned off, completely dead, and then you've got this one crop of vibrant green hemp, which I believe could have been used, such as a lucerne crop, as a dryland feeding option, or a drought mitigant feed crop. So, and unfortunately, with the legislation, we're not allowed to feed that to animals. And so, I guess from a New Zealand export market, this is sort of what we really think some of the key points we can talk about. And again, just sort of touching on all these things. I guess another big thing from us is the lack of need for pesticides and insecticides. So there's a much lower chemical input for hemp. It's not nothing, but it's definitely a heck of a lot lower. And all of our crops are tested for residue, which I think is really important, for maintaining that quality reputation. So this is our facility up in Culverden, where we grow, dry, and then process it all into these raw ingredients. And really looking to tell that traceability paddock to plate story. And thank you very much for your time.
I'm breaking things. Brett, thank you so much. And that gave, again, a different perspective on this plant. I think we're going into the Q&A, but I will quickly pick up my learnings so that you guys have a little bit of time to actually think of questions. Also, the people online, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and Katie, she will actually make sure that your question will be read out, and then we have the panel actually answering them. We started with Peter from Ag Research, and he basically showed us that we have one plant with multiple uses, and he was very clear that there is a journey going on to differentiate the two different usages, and he indicated that there are many opportunities when it comes to genetics and standardization for both plants. Then Parmjeet focused into the more medicinal use of the ingredients of the plant, and basically he was making sure that there is a relationship being developed between the patient and the plant, and making sure that standardization and high quality is eminent. Then we have Brad, and again, Brad, you took us on a journey on the multi-use of the plant, and emphasizing that this is still a very young industry and that regulation is in dire need of updating to allow us as an industry and as a country to benefit from the full spectrum of potential opportunities that this plant can give us. I'll leave it at that and open the floor for questions. And I think this time we're going to start with a question from online. But first I will ask the panelists to actually come up front and actually sit on these chairs, please.
This first question has come in from Julio. You mentioned the relative small size of the New Zealand cannabis industry. Do you know how developed is this industry in Australia, and what are these distinctive attributes you have identified from New Zealand hemp to develop as a profitable and sustainable business?
Thanks. So yeah, like one biggest difference is they have 2,000 patients already, 200,000 patients. Out of that, about 60% are active. So if you see in New Zealand, we are a bit behind. So we have about, with my some personal communications with the medical doctors, we have about 3,000 patients presently. So that's one thing. So when I see that innovation and research with MOH, the regulations are very friendly. So that's where in innovation we can lead Australia. I strongly believe in it. So that's where the industry is presently in terms of comparison between both the countries.
Thank you so much. Any questions in the room here? I'll have 1, 2, I see 3 questions. I'll start up here, I'll come to you, and I'll go to the back.
Kia ora, guys. Great presentation, thank you very much. A little question that's just arisen in my head around the commercial success of when we have the separation of the CBD and the hemp. What might it look like when my neighbour's been growing hemp and I want to grow CBD? I'm limited because I can't because of the pollination issue. So more my question is what happens, or how might it look when you've got someone growing medicinal cannabis and then someone comes in the within the vicinity that wants to grow a hemp crop. So I'm just really interested on how that might look as our options commercially grow. So really to any of the panellists, what their thoughts are.
I guess I'm not too strong on how that will work, but farmers at the moment have crops where they don't want cross-pollination, and there are regulations around how far you can plant things away from each other. So I'm assuming that same sort of system will work for hemp. In most countries it's between 5 and 10 kilometres, I think, separation. Hemp is pollinated by the wind, and there are reports of it going a long way further than that, but most countries have about a 5 kilometre separation between activities.
Can we find out how Brad avoids this? Because with you having 15 hectares, was it hectares or acres?
So we've grown probably, I think, about 230 hectares in the last couple of years. So we grow predominantly up in Culverton, so we don't have any other growers around us. I guess to touch on your question, I think this is where we need to see a real collaborative effort for the industry. I don't think we should be growing in isolation or having individual growers scattered everywhere without understanding what others are doing, because it's going to affect a multitude of things. In just the same way, we don't want multi-species cross-pollination, but potentially between fibre and seed at the same time. So I think there really needs to be an industry-wide body that represents all growers, and sitting under that body would give people clear understanding and clear guidelines around what exactly that means. Because for a lot of hemp growers, they would have no idea that there's anyone growing CBD or there's any concern about that. Funnily enough, we've heard a number of stories from Takaka and up in Hawke's Bay where, farmers have gone and grown hemp, and then there have been, serious repercussions for what it's done to, potentially guys who have been growing, cannabis, illicit crops, and we need to be aware of that. And and I think this is where change in regulation, government direction can help bring those guys out of the woodwork, and then also give some real clear guidance around how do we want to structure this stuff, because it will work, but it just it needs to be a joint effort rather than going in isolation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Surinder Tandon. My question is for Peter Lawrence, my former colleague at AgResearch. Congratulations to all the speakers for wonderful presentations. My question is about the industrial hemp, particularly on the fiber and textile side. You mentioned that the New Zealand hemp growers have been producing, hemp for various industrial products like, for fiber and food and protein, and you mentioned, apart from, the medical cannabis side, the hemp, I would like to know from Peter, what sort of volume of hemp production is there targeted for fiber? And also, I have visited New Zealand Natural Fibers, they have the new decortificator machine. How are the hemp growers getting the fiber extracted from their crop for commercial sales? Is New Zealand Natural Fiber able to do the decortification on commission basis? Just want to know what sort of arrangement is there. Thank you, Peter.
New Zealand Natural Fibers have their decorticator set up. They're in the early stages of setting it up and sort of refining the processes. I haven't had a great deal of contact with them. So it's really their business. It's up to them how they operate in terms of dealing with people with fibre. But obviously they want their machine utilised. Going back to the question of the quantity of fibre, again, I'm not sure. We had about 1,300 hectares planted in New Zealand, a total of hemp in 2020. That dropped a little bit in 2021, and we're still waiting on the 2022 figures. Obviously, New Zealand Natural Fibers have planted quite a lot in this last season for their fibre research. They are serious about the fibre, and they're serious about doing the work behind getting the varieties, getting the genetics right for high quality fibre. So they have planted a reasonable amount, I think, across their fibre and their wider group that includes Hemp Farm. They planted something like 1,000 hectares in the 2022 season. Hope that answers some of your questions.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to the back of the room, we have a couple of questions online, if that's okay. Katie.
Yeah. So the first one is regarding medicinal cannabis. Is there any particular channels or persons that companies can approach to have guidance on navigating legislation or licenses, etc., outside of the government?
Outside
Outside of the government?
Is there any contractors or anything?
So there is.
I can be a consultant, so I know in both the countries. Or just in the setting, he can also pay. Pay less to him. So.
And then another one is regarding hemp food. What barriers do you see or have encountered with regard to engaging with your consumers? For example, education or stigma, and how have you mitigated these issues?
Well, I guess, when we first started, we were at the farmers market, answering questions about whether people could smoke our tops and, is this, going to get my kid high and stuff like that. And I think, it's been a real ground roots or grassroots organic effort to really shift that public education piece, to just, as soon as you get past the fact that, high THC cannabis and hemp are different, then immediately the question goes to, oh, well, why am I going to take it? So I think we're, I don't know what's going on there, but the main thing is, there's constantly a question about why is this product or this crop sitting under the Controlled Medicines Act and under the Ministry of Health, and it immediately raises people's concerns, particularly from the older generation. So we've really had to work hard to sort of like justify and validate why it needs to be licensed and why it needs to be so far from a road and a school and all the rest of it, which really places just so many more hurdles in front of us that we're already trying to overcome. But I think, from our perspective, as people are at a point now, particularly with their health, where there's a lot of desperate people out there looking for alternative solutions to pharmaceuticals, and when we've got a product that we know addresses those issues and has and is actually effective, then they actually really don't care where it comes from. They just want something that works and something that's natural. So from us, it's really shifting to, all right, how's our product actually helping the customer, and what's it actually doing for the customer? And I think when you start to shift your focus to that perspective, and I think that's across the board from the hemp industry, why are our products so effective, and how can we further tailor our products to the problems people are facing, then you sort of overcome any sort of like preconceived notions of lack of safety or effects like that, because as soon as you overcome that hurdle then and start to focus on the problem, that seems to drop away. But if the government was to come out and say, hey, look, we've got a clear definition between hemp and high THC cannabis, and the crop was sitting with the MPI and classes of food, I think that would help immensely the public perception of our industry, and really put us light years ahead of where we are now. So I really think until that happens, we're really going to be, it's just a real slog at the moment to try and grow that market, and even from the point of advertising and all the rest of it. So
Thank you, Brad. I think David has a question.
Yeah, great presentation, guys, and it's good to see such an exciting industry for the region happening here in Canterbury. Just a random question, but Brad, why did they sort of ban it as a being able to feed animals with hemp into AT?
Yeah, I think there was concern that there would be traceable amounts of cannabinoids in meat and milk going into export markets where cannabinoids are banned or illegal. So. Not founded on any kind of scientific research, or there's no evidence that would be the case. I mean, if you think about the amount of cannabinoids in hemp, and particularly THC, 0.35%, that even to think that could possibly become traceable in a byproduct of an animal is quite an out there sort of like perception. But I think. I know Australia is doing some research around, whether or not there's, by feeding animals hemp products, that there's traceable amounts of cannabinoids in them, and I just think, to just put a halt on something like, such a potentially large market for us here in New Zealand, particularly for animals that we just feed here in New Zealand. You think of like, poultry and pork and all the rest of it, products that we're not even exporting, to just completely put a roadblock in front of that, I think is very short-sighted, and to not at least have put some, roadmap in place to actually understand if that's actually the case, and then how could we mitigate that, and then, and then on the other side of that is, well, actually, how is it enhancing our New Zealand products? And I know there's Tamania lamb which is going on, and they're looking at increasing the omega-3 content of our lamb, and have marketing that as higher than salmon and things like that. So what is the micronutrient and the fatty acid profile of the hemp seed and hemp stock feed options doing to actually the quality of the products that we're exporting? Because I do really think that it would be far more beneficial than potentially a lot of the options that are available to us now. So it would just be great to see probably, how do we actually validate that claim that there's potential risk there, and then how do we mitigate that?
I think also the reason was, as Brad said, a trade issue, and the issue is that the levels that they have set is 0. They haven't said you can allow a little bit. They've said you can have 0, and modern technologies for analysing things can pick up very, very minute amounts. So it would, I think, be relatively easy fixed if we could reset that 0 figure to some small amount allowable.
And yeah, presently, just adding to Brad, so there's some animal feeding trials are going in Western Australia, and there are some cultivars in Canada which are close to 0 THC, but again, depends upon Australian weather conditions. The crop might be hot, it might get THC, but that trial will give further information to get a 0 THC and milk or something. So, and on the other side, Food Safety Authority, Australia, New Zealand, there's a proposal with them in Australia to have hemp seedlings in salad. So, yeah.
And we were, before 2018, when they confirmed that we weren't supposed to, we were feeding seed cake to animals. And it was kept under the radar a little bit, but it didn't cause any issues.
I think there is a question online again. Thank you very much, Jens.
Just before I read this last question, actually, there are a few coming through the Q&A function, so we may not have time to address all of them, but if you do have more questions, please do continue to send them through, because we can collect the answers and then we will respond to them after the event, or the people in the room can hopefully get a chance to ask their questions in the networking part. But the next question that we can go to is, last week the police launched a massive operation for getting rid of illegal cannabis plants. Do you have any idea of the size of non-legal cannabis farms, and what does a person need to do to get the permissions to grow their own plants?
So yeah, that's a good question. So presently, there's roadblocks on the prescription side. One is, medical doctors are not consistently, repeatedly getting same product. For example, if I am prescribing as a medical doctor to him, and next time I have a new batch, he's feeling very good, but the next batch, he says, it doesn't work. That creates more a roadblock there. So people who are getting their conditions better, then what they should do? They should go to this illicit market, which is not good. And in illicit market, they are growing it with a lot of pesticides, and at the same time adding a lot of hormones to quickly grow it. That's why what we are trying to do, so producing it scientifically, removing those roadblocks, this illicit market will go away. But unfortunately in Australia, New Zealand, people still go there. So
I think there's about 400,000 regular users of cannabis, like illicit cannabis in New Zealand.
yeah,
So it's a lot of people
there are lots here.
who are using it for not just recreational but for medical as well. So there's a lot of growers out there.
Yeah. And if you see, you learn from Canada is federally legal, right? And US has a problem, federal and state versus. So Canada is the closest model where we can learn from there. And presently the illicit cannabis prices are same but in the industry. So, and again, it's the recreational there. So that's for the patients, it's a good place. And you go to a medical doctor, he say, oh, you try this, and whatever fits you. So that's again without clinical trials.
Thank you. I'll take a question in the room. Katie.
Kia ora ngā kai kōrero, kia ora koutou mō tō tātou kōrero I tēnei ata. I'm going to try and roll a whole lot of questions into one. I've got a big page here. Hey, so I think that you guys touch on the endocannabinoid system, and I think that how important that is actually for our practitioners to start learning about that, And once we open up our pathway, because what I'm noticing is our education pathways, we don't have any education pathways. So that actually also creates another bottleneck, because we don't have any ways for our communities to understand that they can, that this isn't just a drug. This is, there is more to it. So how do you guys see, I guess, us as a country creating a pathway into the industry for the normal person, so that those that are from the illicit world, that have been doing, I guess, illicit research for a long time, how is there going to be space for them to come into this so that you don't have to work so hard, so that you can have some background where they're not going to indict themselves effectively with their skill sets and their knowledge bases that they do have. So do you see a space for them coming into this?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think we saw with the referendum just how close it was to being a fully legal product, which would have immediately, allowed those people to enter the legalised space. And I think there's so much knowledge and understanding of some of the products, particularly in the green fairy space across New Zealand, that we need to tap into, and we need to understand we can't just be relying on Green Lab, as the only person in the country doing any legal research. So I think 100% it needs to come from a government perspective, and that's both at an education level and an acknowledgement that the endocannabinoid system first of all exists, and then that and I guess the analogy I use is like, why would I have some alcohol that's out of my system in 24 hours because my body sees it as a poison, but if I go have some CBD or some THC tinctures, well, that can be in my system for 3 to 4 weeks afterwards. So your body is a lot more intelligent than we give it credit for, and I think making that awareness that why is our body holding on to these cannabinoids if they're bad for us or if they're somehow not having benefit.
Why does our body have so many receptors?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it, again, really needs to come down to government acknowledgement of the health impacts and the work that those people have been doing in the background.
So we are just adding to that. So in some cases, when I review that literature, we are reinventing the wheel. Like go into Chinese medicine system or Indian old system, and I'm reading those papers, some things which need not to be done again. So there's already evidence there, but that evidence is in ancient times. So we have to put in normal pharmaceutical practice as a single molecule or a combination of molecule giving that effect. So that knowledge is very useful. And as compared to Australia, here like you can get those illegal plants under the declaration. It means you are already having some information why that plant was being grown.
So how would one, I guess, and it came out through the online questions, so how would one approach a company like yourselves that said, hey look, I've got some information. Well, not personally right now, but I have some research that I would love to share with you, and I think that you would benefit from this because I already have, so say I was green theory, I already have so many patients that are doing well on this, and I have some anecdotal evidence, but how can I do this without indicting oneself?
Good question. So like on a website, we have a info email. It copies me in through the admin, so I can go through it, and with my knowledge in that area, I can see, oh, this is a good one. Email is a good contact. Or on LinkedIn, become my friend there, or link with me. So I try to reply people there, and there are a lot of there's no question is dumb question. I learn a lot on LinkedIn, so that's another place.
Peter, did you want to react to this, or?
I don't know that there's a lot more that I can add. I mean, the Rua Bioscience have definitely brought in some of their local experts. So some of the bigger organisations and companies that are setting up are taking advantage of that. But to get much further, it probably does need a government change in the way that those things are seen. So.
Well, that brings us. I know that there's a lot more questions, right? So what is actually for all the people in the room? What can actually happen? There is still coffee. There is still some food. So please network and talk and ask questions. For the people that have been online and post questions, what we'll make sure that we relate them to our absolutely wonderful panel. Brad, Pamjit, Peter, thank you so much for enlightening us in this really exciting and involving industry. Thank you very much for being at the Lincoln University campus, either virtual or in person. Thank you very much for being with B-Link Innovation. Watch our website. There are many more events like this coming up. We will actually talk about farm succession on the 14th of June, and we'll actually jump into agritourism on the 30th of June. But we're also involved with a lot of partners in different areas in the agri-food and fiber space as well. So we've teamed up with Christchurch and Z and the University of Canterbury in the Food, Fiber and Agritech Challenge. And the showcase is coming up, so definitely look them up. And of course, BOMA is coming up with the Agri-Food Summit, and that is an amazing place. So if you have 2 days to spare, you will learn a lot, and you will see me there as well. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much online as well.